Hey everybody, and welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips with the Friday edition. Yay, Kiri! Hello! Kiri's not squeaking today. She squeaked so often yesterday that she's out of squeaks. Are you out of squeaks? She thought about it, but she's like, eh. Hey, Magnetic Gumby with the sub-aversary. Thank you. Thank you. 12 months. Impressive. Morning. Yeah, it's a morning. It's a morning. Morning. Good morning. And we're going to be working on a Highland Heroine, which is why apparently I'm adopting a slight Scottish accent. A terrible Scottish accent. Maybe it's Irish, technically. Marnin. I think so. But yes, I slipped. Let's go down here. Hello, Kiri girl. Yeah, yep, no squeaks. Yesterday you got squeaks. There were squeaks in the morning that Justin caused you to miss. There were squeaks in the afternoon, which you never get, and there were squeaks when we came into the computer room in the evening. So yesterday was a very squeaky day for Kiri. But today the squeaks are she's just like, I'm taking the day off. No squeaks today. Hello, Hagar. Sure, Gumby. The question is your stuff improved? If you feel you've improved even a little bit, then my work is done. Or my work is continuing, but my work has been more or less productive. Hey, Nomad Zeke, how's it going? So we're doing Highland Heroine today. And, and I nailed the skin tone that we need to use on the statue yesterday. I finally figured out the light brown skin on my D&D stream. So the light brown skin recipe unfortunately uses, I haven't highlighted it or anything, but the recipe unfortunately uses a canceled color. Ooh, and time to bring it back. Yes. Oh, good. Like the tortoise. That's the way to go. As long as, because that lets you, that way you see improvement continually. You aren't like spiking and then sitting on a plateau, which is annoying. Slow and steady progress is good. So anyway, skin tones and skin tones. We're going to do auburn hair today. We're just going to mix, because I'm in a mixing mood lately. And also, like, you know, I've showed you guys how to use, you guys know how to use triads. You don't need, you don't need me to show you how to use triads. So we'll try some experiments today. Because I could sit around and waste, 3 minutes digging out my auburn shadow, or I could just mix something that looks like auburn shadow and show you guys how to do it too. Alrighty. Morning, Val. The week, it is almost finished. And I actually caught up mostly on my Patreon stuff, which is great. Let me grab. So if you're going to mix a auburn hair color, you want to start with any dark brown and add red. So, and how red your result is going to vary by how red your starting brown is. So let's grab a selection of dark browns. So russet browns, we'll grab all my faves here. That would be interesting. Let's go with ebony flesh. It's got a lot of blue in it. That could be very interesting. Let's grab, that'd be interesting. I think that's pretty much it. Where's my ruddy leather, darn it? There it is. Ruddy leather is probably the go-to for making a red hair color. But any of these colors, I suspect, would be able to mix a decent auburn hair. Ebony flesh and nut brown will be a little weird about it because they've got purple in them, or blue, which would make purple. But russet brown might go more orange because it has a lot of yellow in it. If you look at it next to ruddy leather, you can clearly see that ruddy leather is more red and that russet brown is more yellow. So you know right away that if you're adding more red to this, you're going to get an orangier color. And if you're adding red to ruddy liner, it's going to go more red. Right? That makes sense to you guys? If it's a yellowy brown, it's going to go more orange if you add red. And if it's got blue in it, like ebony flesh does, it's going to go kind of purple. So let's experiment. Let's find our color. So if you want to choose a red to put in it, you want something that's got a heavy load of red. And you don't need a dark red because you're already dealing with such dark paints. So I usually would use something like heraldic or even clear red or anything like that, like a good solid medium red, fresh blood or gory red. I don't know if those all managed to survive the purge. I don't remember. But you could use Sione Scarlet as well. Anything with a super topped off load of red pigment. because you're essentially shifting these into a dark red color. You're using this as the browns as a shader. And the reason you're using brown instead of black is that when you mix black with red, you actually get purple, not brown. So you want to use a near black. You can use a near black color, but it's got to have brown pigment in it. Holly berry would work probably just fine, Balrog. So let us put a drop of each of these down and assess. Russet brown, then we'll show you guys the results. Let's see here. Oh, unless, of course, everything decides to clog, because black and brown throws a little hissy fit when I don't use it for more than 2 days. Black and brown, seriously. I'll actually put a couple of drops of these in here so that we can do this. Magma red is quite orange, Valendar. Hollyberry is also slightly orange. It's a little bit different. Sione has no other pigment than red in it, so that you're gonna get more transparency out of it. But it is a good sub for clear red if you need something that's really eye-droppingly, eye-screamingly bright. Let's see, this will be nut brown. I'm interested to see how nut brown plays with this, because it does have some purple in it. It could make a really good, dark red. Anyway, there. Now let's see here. So yes, we're going to mix. So here's our, let's actually look at our paint, shall we? And let's go out. And let's go over here. We're going to move Ms. Heroine over here. And let's do Ebony Flesh, which should be very interesting. Now for the darker colors in these picks, I think I'm actually going to go with the brighter red. Whereas with the more medium ones, I think I'm going to go with Heraldic Red. Just because these already have so much pigment in them, I think I'm just going to go with the pure red. Now, the most predictable one of these to mix a dark red hair with is going to be Ruddy Leather. It's already a reddish brown. It's already almost where you need it to be. All you need is to put a pop of red in it. So there's all of our colors. Let me get closer. Let me grab a black base and see if I can make the camera actually read them correctly. Not with all this white, it says. There we go. A little bit better. So you can see kind of the differences. You can see that Ebony Flesh is very dark compared with the Ruddy Leather. You can kind of see the reddishness of the Ruddy Leather. This is your nut brown. It's a bit more purpley. And then we've got our blackened brown, which is a very neutral dark brown, kind of looks like dark chocolate. And then we have our russet brown, and that is very yellowish. So let's grab Heraldic Red and put 2 drops of that into our russet, our nut, and our ruddy. And let's grab Sione Scarlet and put 2 drops of that into the really dark browns, the blackened brown, and the Ebony Flesh. Sione is also pouting because I haven't used it, apparently. And then we will assess. And this is the kind of mixing, guys, that although you may think that it's just a waste of paint, is actually quite fun and can teach you a lot about how pigments interact. Hey, Inara, I'm mixing things. That's because they have a, that's because Holly has different pigments in it that are higher coverage, Valendar. There we go. All right. Because I'll tell you, they all use the same base. All right, so there we go. So we got all our mixes. Now we'll see what makes the best auburn. We're having them fight. Fight! And we'll rate them. Maybe I should grab, do I have a white piece of paper? I used to. Somewhere. Have one. There it is. Wonder if I have one that I could just steal that I kind of put stuff on before but didn't take up all the space on. Yeah, that one might work. There, that works. Haha! All right, and we'll swatch them out. So, russet brown plus 2 drops of heraldic. That's not bad, actually. It does go a bit orangey. Like, remember, this is a shadow color for auburn, and you can always darken it as well. So as I cover more of this, guys, we'll get to a point where it looks more, you can tell more what it looks like on the camera, as long as I put black by it. So that's not a bad dark reddish brown. You can kind of see it. I would say that's fair. I would say I might add a little more red to it. So the thing that you're getting here is that russet brown is really strong. It's loaded with pigment. It's loaded especially with a lot of yellow. So that's a pretty good red brown though. That's actually pretty sexy, all things considered. So I would probably put an extra drop of red in here. And I would probably shade this, any of these by the way, I would probably shade with like maybe a dark purple. Dark purple if you want to be interesting, or a dark brown. Yeah, I like that a little bit more with a little bit more. You can see that it's pretty reddish. There, you can see the color of it. It's a really rich color, isn't it? So that's pretty good actually. I would say that's a very nice starting point for dark red hair. Oh, Pendrick, thank you. You figured out how to resub. Yay! 10 months. Well, good. I'm glad you figured out how to resub. It was silly not to have you resubbed with all the time you spend with us. Oh, and there we go. Twisted Oma with the resub. Thank you for the primes, guys. I appreciate it. All right, so let's move on to our next one. This is Black and Brown with Sione Scarlet. Black and Brown also has a lot more black in it than russet, I'll tell you that. So we're going to end up fighting that. Yeah, like the Sione Scarlet hardly shifted Black and Brown at all. Like I'd have to double my load to go actually a 2-to-1 red to Black and Brown to start to get reddish, but still it's way dark. Like you can kind of see how much it's hardly shifted toward red at all. So I would say at this point that my investment in red to get Black and Brown to shift is not worth it. Black and Brown turns out not to be a good brown to use for this. Now, I'll be very interested to see if we get the same thing when we deal with Ebony Flash Mix. So what we're doing this, guys, for people who are just showing up, is we are assessing what makes the best auburn hair mix. So, like, I don't want to mess around trying to find my auburn shadow. So my theory was that you could use any dark brown with red and mix a color that will make a good auburn shadow. And I've been kind of proven wrong because I'm going to put a nice stripe of black on this, by the way, guys, because it'll help the camera adjust to see the color the way it should. Put enough black on the paper, it tends to be a little bit happier. There. Put a black border on there. Tends to show the colors a little better. But anyway, so when we mixed our Sione Scarlet with our Black and Brown, we didn't get much help at all. I should have laid down some swatches beforehand. I really should just paint out some swatch sheets just to use when I feel like it. There, that's a bet. Yeah, that's better. Good. When we put enough black in the frame, we get to see the actual colors. But you can see how dark that Black and Brown mix stayed. So we'll actually put a swatch of it down just for comparison's sake. But the red really isn't coming through. So I'd say this is a pretty nice, like, dark brown. It's really warm. But I don't know that I would use it for the shadow for red hair. Like, maybe for because it is so dark, maybe it could actually be a shadow for this color. To see how dark it stayed here. So the thing here is just that Black and Brown is so heavily pigmented with black. Now we've got Nut Brown, which is a purpley brown from Bones, and we've used Heraldic with it. Whoa, that shoved it way off. Now, part of the problem, I think, was that my Nut Brown wasn't quite mixed up so well. So let me give it another shake, because the red totally overwhelmed it there. Do you see it? Hey there, John David. All right, so I'm going to add some more Nut Brown to this. But Nut Brown is also like a color where there are some colors where I go just flat out for coverage. And then there are some colors where it's more important to me to hit the color than it is to hit the a high coverage. Like Nut Brown, I was definitely aiming for a specific color. So the coverage is Midland, but I hit the color. So it's like, kind of like, yeah, this is this is just turning out weird. I don't know. The problem is it's not warm enough. It's not orange enough. What's happening is that the purple in it is cooling it off. Oh, I think that was the doorbell. Maybe we got an Amazon thing. Oh, well, they'll have to wait. So when I swatch this out, it just doesn't look like a very natural red hair to me. I guess you could use it. It just seems a little... You see how red it is? It's fakey, right? It's goth girl red almost. So you could totally do that. Too much work, Pendrake. I like paper. And craft sticks for sure, but normally I'd just reach for watercolor paper, or in this case, this is marker paper. And the craft sticks wouldn't have the white problem, but they'd still be a different color. So there we go. So we've got these laid out. So you can see kind of the difference. This one is still the winner. The russet brown plus the heraldic is still the winner. This one's almost pinkish. See the violet in it? That's from the nut brown. Oh yeah. Yeah, I suppose if you got the tongue depressor ones, you could just do the swatches on the stick. Although you'd want to prime it first, probably. So, all right. So now we're on to Ebony Flesh, and my prediction was that this was going to go really purple because it has a ton of blue in it, and I am seeing a definite purple shift. I'm going to actually double my mix here a little bit. I think we used Sione with this. Yeah, because it was really dark. So let's see here. See if I can get it to play so that you guys can actually see the color. All right, this actually works pretty well. I mean, it is purpley. Let's see if I can thin it a little bit to show you guys. Sometimes if you're not sure, like what colors are in a color, like what kind of brown it might be, it helps to grab some water and pull it out thinner. So now you can see that it's got kind of a purpley hue to it down there on the bottom. And a lot of red. You can see a lot more of the color. So that's not bad, but it's not warm. Like, it's not what I consider auburn. Like, still, russet brown is the winner at this point. That said, you could use any of these. It would just give you very different effects, right? So you could use the more pinkish one here, but maybe you would take it up more gothy, more red, more artificial red. This would be a good ground color for that. Dr. Bob, we are essentially mixing auburn hair colors. I'm kind of showing you guys that you can really throw any dark brown together with any red, decently bright red, and create your own auburn hair. So I'm assessing which ones are best, and then we're going to paint our Highland Heroine with the appropriate color, and I'll show you how to highlight it. But I didn't feel like grabbing my auburn shadow out of... Reaper actually makes a red hair triad. So you can just default to that and you'll get great results, but I tend to like to mix, so I thought I would do a little color mixing today. Because, you know, whatever. So this last one is the one that I thought would work the best, and probably the one that I would have started with if I just should choose one off the bat, which would be the Ruddy Leather, which is already a reddish brown, already close to what I want, mixed with Heraldic Red. And my gut is that, yeah, I put too much red in it out the bat, but if I add another drop of Ruddy Leather... then I bet I can shift it. To a decent red hair color. Yeah, this one is still looking a little artificial. The Heraldic really overwhelmed the Ruddy Leather. Interesting. That front load of red really comes through. Okay, so this is not actually... It's close to the russet brown, and it's certainly a good auburn color. Like, look at how nice and strong this is. But it's a little more artificial than I thought it was going to be. So interesting. So actually, for a natural auburn, I think I would choose this one, which is, hold on, get this. I can label it. I have the ability. Oh, that's not quite what I wanted there. So the russet brown with the heraldic is actually the one I think does the best job. I mean, they're all auburn. They're all auburn chibi, but this is very candy. It's a very candy red, which to me is a less realistic. If you look at auburn hair, it's a dark brownish orange. Like it's much more like this color, which is why you highlight it up with orange. you could use any of these, as I said, any of these to create a decent auburn hair. It would just be, you'd get a very different effect with each one. So, oh, what do we got? So we could go either way. This one, let me put down what we got here. So as a reminder, this one is 91, 99. And then the next one is 9137. 9137. And the next one is going to be nut brown, which I think is 9427. I have, yeah, 9427. Which is very kind of washed out and odd, but could make a good, like, goth girl base. Yeah, the right one is definitely a candy apple red, right? And then this one is the ebony skin, which has actually got a lot of blue in it, which is why it's shifted slightly purple when I did that. So that will be 9440. And then the last one, which I thought would be better, but which actually looks a bit artificial, is 9109. Oh no, and it's still wet, so it's going to fight. $91.09 Ruddy Leather. There. That's mostly good. All right, so there you've got your results. And you see how different. They really are very different. I think I'm with you that I like the candy one, even though it's artificial. Though if I was going for something very natural, and to be honest, Auburn Shadow is like midway between these two on the ends. Like Auburn Shadow is somewhere in the middle of these. So if you use, for the darkest ones, I use Sione Scarlet Jabberwock, and for the lightest ones, I used Heraldic Red, so 9402. So just so you can see, like, the different effects that you can get using, you know, similar, they're all dark browns, right? And they're all, like, reds that are moderately bright or really bright, but you get very different colors, and it's all dependent on the pigments that you have in those browns. So this is why I say people can get into trouble a lot if they don't know what pigments are in the paints when they're just throwing random colors into them, which is why I recommend, like, you know, using more saturated colors in your mixing so that you know what's in it. If you use colors that you're not sure what's in it, you can get very different results, sometimes not the result you want. So all in all, given the cheesecake nature of our Highland Heroine, she is kind of, kind of a little bit cheesecake, which I don't mind. And also the pinkness of her skin, I think I'm going to go with Candy Apple. I think I'm going to go with the 9109. And we'll see how it looks. It will be harder to take up, again, if you want a natural auburn, if you're doing a bust and you want, like, say, a historical bust, you want a natural auburn, do the 9199 with the Heraldic Red. There we go. All right, cool. So there we go. We've done it. So let's go Candy Apple. Now that we've gotten our color down. I haven't finished her skin highlights either, but, you know, we'll get there. So this, since we're going somewhat artificial with her red, or fantasy, as it were, see, you'll be able to see. Let me get close. Let me get zoomed in. Let me get the white palette out of here. She still has a lot of white primer on her, so that's going to kind of affect our colors. But, yeah, there we go. So you see how bright that is. I have lost count of how many subs we've gotten in the last several days to get us closer to our AMA goal. Have you been keeping track, Justin? Justin is busy working on other things. We'll get an answer out of him eventually. So when I put this on, I'm going to be kind of looking for two things. One, you know, how does the color actually look? when I put it over the top of this white primer. And is it what I'm looking for? It's automatically, because it's so dark, it's going to make her skin look really pale. You can see how it just does it. Yeah, this is the Highland Heroine Couves. She's got a two-handed claymore as well. Yeah, I figured, Reaper John, that you didn't. Justin is the one who usually keeps track of it. Last time we talked, I think we're in the 40s. I'm willing to bet we're in the 60s now. It's been a week of a lot of people renewing their subs. So I'll have to look at... Oh.
Sorry. Our subs, I believe, last I checked, is at 73.
Ooh, okay.
But that was... I will say that information was from... What's today? Friday? I think that information was from Tuesday.
Okay, so we just got several subs that even today, we're probably closer to 80-something.
Right.
Okay, cool. So look at how this bleaches out her skin, guys, to go with this dark hair. Now, I'll have to kind of balance that as I go through here. I may need to shift my shadows in the skin a bit darker. Or once I highlight this hair up a bit, I may find that I can minimize that effect if I don't want it. But this is kind of the secret. If you want a skin to look really, really pale, put a dark hair color next to it, and it goes really pale. It's a little less so in person, but it still is going really, really fair. And I wanted to do that, but I don't want it to be too pasty, so I may need to bring in darker shadows at this point. And this is an example of how everything shifts according to the color that's next to it, right? Because when we block that off, we get skin tones with, a fair amount of depth, right? If you look at her legs. But the minute you add in that dark color, everything shifts lighter. And that's partially the camera, but it's also what your eye is going to do. The camera's just mimicking your eye and making it deathly obvious in this case. Color always shifts according to the colors you put next to it. Always, always, always. So keep this in mind when you are choosing colors on a figure if you have very light or very dark colors. If you do something that's got a lot of very dark colors and then you put like a lot of light on the figure, like a lot of light colors next to it, the details in those dark colors are going to kind of withdraw, and you're going to have to like really exaggerate them, like highlights and such, to make them stand out, because the light color is just going to take all the attention away from that. Things like that. In this case, the dark... Yeah, I always was annoyed at Prime not auto-renewing too. So in this case, the dark is going to make her skin look very pale indeed. The dark hair. Now, of course, this is pretty much a shadow or base, so it will highlight. We will highlight it. We'll have to essentially reassess at that point and decide if we need to do some adjustment. Okay, and there's the end of her braid. So that definitely puts a dark foil around her face. Cool! Thanks for the gift sub, John David. Hey, Grey Wolf, how's it going? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I always get a sad because my Prime account is on my General Anne account, and it's not on my Painting Big account. And I really don't need two Prime accounts, so. But I'm always on my Painting Big account as far as when I'm on Twitch, so it's always, oh. My poor Prime sub has not been utilized adequately. Yeah, they don't... I think they don't auto-renew it because the idea of the Prime sub is that they want you to spread the love around, so they don't want you to just throw it onto a streamer and just thoughtlessly leave it there, which is what, let's face it, most people would. They just, would do it, and the sub would never move because, it's free, so you don't have to worry about it. Well, relatively free with your Prime account. But, yeah, so they want you to move it around. Pretty sure that's why they do it that way. Which I totally get, and I like the idea of spreading the streamer love, but... No, I don't. I don't even know what that is, Mighty Jabberwock. My Prime is entirely a means of getting me instant gratification or near instant gratification on my Amazon orders. I don't even look at most of the other things I get with my Prime membership, to be honest. Alright, so this is not quite a solid base coat. We can still see a little bit of the primer showing through. So we will go and fix that a little bit. Now, since we've gone so very red with our... Oh, no. And I blorfed. Blorf. Might be too late. Might need to repaint the boob. Yep, gonna have to repaint. That's okay. It's rosy skin. It's easy. We'll just put some white over it to remind me to repaint it. Except that I've now gotten water all over it. Lucas said he's down to stream in 3-hour blocks. Reaper, hire him. I don't know that we could pay him enough for that. I think Luca has such a large audience, John David, that it's far more financially, makes far more financial sense for him to stream for himself. I mean, Reaper, the fact that Reaper pays decently for streaming doesn't mean that it pays as much as a good streamer with hundreds of fans, you know, can. And Luca's always gotten a big audience when I've seen him on. So. Ah. I just feel that when you're as popular a streamer as Luca, it makes more sense to do stuff on your own channel. It's nice of him to be willing, though. Alright, so what I would do normally when I was dealing with all of this is I would get some oranges out next and see what I could mix with them. So usually I go pretty broad orange, like bright, bright orange, because I'm going to be mixing it into like my red color a little bit to see what I can do. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that mix and see if it's too soon, if I need to come up with another color to kind of bridge the gap. Yeah, just to see what he's eating. He's broke, he'll keep streaming. Hey, 1,000 alpaca fans is pretty awesome. Alright, so there's so much, like, dark in that color that when I put orange into it, it goes burnt orange, which is actually what we want. But this is probably a little too different straight out the gate because we've gone so red, so artificially red. So I may actually put another drop of heraldic in here to see what I can get. Usually I would not do this. Usually if I'm going for a natural red hair, I don't want red. Red hair highlights orange. It's the way it is. To go red with the highlights is actually just like looks fake most of the time, but this may work okay. Yeah, that's closer. All right, so if I look at these two guys next to each other. Boop. Let's put my base in there so we can see the colors a little better. There we go. So that's our base coat. This is our highlight. They look like they do work together, and that's because there's a little bit of this color in this color. Also, the heraldic red that I used to shift this color is in this color as well. So again, colors in common when you're doing mixes are going to make the colors in question work together better as highlights and shadows. So I'm going to go with that color then. That was 1 drop of heraldic red added, and I do about 2 brushfuls, you know. I did 2 drops of the orange into 2 brushfuls of our initial base color, and then I dropped 1 drop of heraldic red in, and I tend to work with 2s and 1s when I'm mixing. Alrighty, so we're going to go with this color and see what we can do with it. And I've got my base color as well. There's still a little bit of not quite solid coverage. Now, since we are putting this color over a very dark color, we may find that it may be worth our while to undercoat with white first. But we're going to try it and see if we can make it work. Sometimes it's just really hard when you start with a dark base coat to get stuff to cover over the top of it. when you're working lighter, especially when you're working with transparent colors like yellows and oranges. I'm just putting a more solid coat color here. And this is usually what I find because I thin my base coats. You know, I need 2 coats to make it really, really solid. That's fine. Some people get frustrated with the fact that you need to do that for Master Series, but honestly, I would much rather have this, and you know, have a little bit more work to base coat than have an easy base coat, but then have to work super hard to get my paint to the consistency for layering or glazing. That's kind of the trade-off. A thicker paint or a higher coverage paint, or usually they're both, is going to need a lot more thinning to get to the point where you want it. All right, so highlights. Just checking up. Highland Heroine. It's got an E on the end, Hagar. Come on. And actually, I'm considering now whether I want to put a shader on this first. Because normally, with a red hair that's kind of artificial like this, I would totally use a purple. And we've got Kraken ink around here somewhere. I know we do, because I was keeping it around because it's pretty. So actually, Kraken ink might be the perfect shadow for this auburn hair. That would be pretty cool. Yeah, and that's certainly something you can do. You could use like Vallejo, Scale 75, any of the thick paints you could use for base coating, and then do mixes and use, you know, MSP for thinned applications. That's totally fair. I mean, back before I worked for Reaper, like, I used a variety of everything, and I just used it according to what it was best at. So, yeah, totally. So, let's see here. I want a 2-to-1, 1-to-2, sorry, paint to water. So, 2 drops of Kraken ink, 4 drops of water. And I'm going to try and make a shadow and shade her hair with purple, because why not, right? Ooh, this is such a pretty color. It's so pretty. Sadie did good with this one. Yeah, I mean, if you let any paint dry out a little bit, it's going to be, you know, better for that sort of application. Here's our Kraken ink. You can see, since I've thinned it, what the color is after you've thinned it. It's a very, very, very pretty color. It is really dark. It's darker than it looks, so hopefully it will make a decent shadow. Watching it thin here, you know, we've lost some of that darkness, so we're going to see, right? It's not thinner, but it's a more fluid base out the gate, Duke. So it's not like we don't add water or anything to it, but there are some, it's chemistry, essentially. The base that we use is more fluid, and so it's easier to, and faster to thin to a workable level for thinned paint applications, like washes, glazes, layering, any of that stuff where you want thinner paint, like I just did. I didn't have to work hard at all to get it to this way. I used to paint with Vallejo back in the day, and it frustrated me that it took me so long to thin the paint to the point where it was more workable. So when I made Master Series, I looked for a paint base that was more fluid on purpose. Because there are applications where you want thicker paint, but I find that for most of the painting that a lot of us do, we want thinner paint. So you may want thicker paint for wet blending or for dry brushing or for base coating, but then there's a whole suite of times that you're going to want thinner paint. So it also depends a lot on just your style as a painter, which I always say, if you tend to want to use thicker paint or you want to use a wet palette all the time, then thicker paint may give you a little more mileage. But if you use a well palette like I do, or if you're just learning, I recommend you get both and play with them. But the well palette works really, really well with Master Series. So I've got some purple shadows there, a little bit around her braid. I mean, Vallejo has its abilities too. Every paint has its strengths and weaknesses. That's interesting, Valandar. I actually think I find that's not true unless you're putting down a base coat first. If you put down a base color first, yes, Reaper is really smooth and good for wet blending. But you need that base color. I missed a part on the back of this braid. There, we'll get it in there. I feel like there's a shadow I'm missing there too, so I need to grab some brown liner or walnut. Let me see, where is it? I've got brown liner out, so brown liner wins. Everybody has a different opinion when it comes down to it. I mean, your mileage may vary, so try it yourself is always the right answer. You may try what I tell you and say, Anne's just smoking. She's, totally wrong about this. I get better results doing X or Y. And it's like, well, then it's totally valid. Go for it. Nobody paints exactly the same way. The way that Anne paints is different from the way a lot of people paint, so. Yeah. I think it's working just fine, Hagar. All right, so essentially you guys see she's got kind of that pale spot right under her chin. I need a shadow in there, so I'm going to have to really go in carefully and try to fill it with this brown liner without losing a lot of my hair or my skin. So I've thinned the paint down a bit so I can go in and see. There we go. We got the shadow in there. And I have covered up a little bit of her chin, but not too bad, so I can come back. I need to touch up the chest anyway, so not too bad. Sometimes when you get close to it, you're like, oh, I screwed that up. I need to go back in. It's not a crisis. Just got to be careful. Take your time. Thinner, paint consistency changes also by the amount of pigment in it, Duke. So it could be that Sadie, because Sadie's doing all the newer colors, usually that means more pigment. More pigment changes your viscosity in general. It'll change it, and actually it's counterintuitive, but it will not make it thicker. It actually makes it thinner. Oh yeah, everybody does. We all, when it's especially when it's Kickstarter fulfillment time, everybody like goes out and packs boxes unless your department is so backed up that it's judged more important for you to be in your department, which is rare. But yeah, Reaper's a small company, guys. Like we maybe barely have 50 employees. Barely. At our most populated. That may change. I mean, obviously we're still growing. Now I have to think about my shadow placement. Oh, you're at a higher elevation. Yep. Yeah, Chibi, for sure. You have to kind of crack them just gently. Yeah, Reaper community. We do have one of the best communities, I think. I think that's partially too that we are so friendly to people who are just learning. Like, we used to get people in for tours, and Dave would do a tour, and they would be new to the hobby, and he'd be like, come to Paint Club, do this, do that, here's the Learn to Paint kit, And that's the kind, and he's one of the top owners, like, he's up there, CFO. So when you have the owners of the company also involved and enthusiastic, that makes a big difference. Some paint company owners are just like, it's what they do for a job, and some are actually enthusiastic about it. So I'm just going through, guys. I'm kind of figuring out where my shadows should be. Like underneath this part where her hair poofs out, there's going to be a bit of a shadow here. The hair, that's actually kind of a braid that goes around, so I'm going to put a little bit of a shadow underneath it. Right there. No, yeah, we're not built around an ultra competitive game or anything. So, where this Kraken ink actually comes in really nice as a shader, guys, is that because it isn't like a really dark or near black brown or something, it's a more of a subtle shadow. So when I paint it in there, you can still see the shadow, but it's not going to take over and look like a line. So that's really nice. All I ask is that if you like the paint, talk about it. Tell people. that you like the paint. Recommend our streams. Recommend our Twitch. Please. Get people over here so they can learn. If they've had problems with the paint, I even welcome them. If they really want to figure out what went wrong, I can probably troubleshoot it. I mean, sometimes it's just going to be a broken paint. But sometimes if they're having frustrations like doing a particular technique, we can troubleshoot it. It's harder when I can't see your brush stroke, but... So also the hair is kind of curling under here at the bottom, so I'm going to add a shadow there. And there's probably going to be a highlight right above it. So essentially, hair is highlighted, and I've said this before, on a bell curve, unlike NMM. So what we're saying with that, with a bell curve, is you start with a shadow, you go to a midtone, you go to a highlight, you go to a midtone, you go to a shadow. That's very different from the way you're doing a very shiny surface like NMM that is opaque. Or non-transparent. So the thing about hair is that it is transparent or translucent. Light passes through it, and that's why you get that bell curve highlight instead of a hard focused highlight with a shadow under it. Well, you know, you can lead them to water, but you can't make them try it, Valandar. The best way to get other people to try Reaper paint is to use Reaper paint and paint something amazing. And then when they ask you what you use, say Reaper Master Series. That's like why it's so awesome that Kirill uses our paint, who is one of the best painters in the world, hands down. And he gets great results with it and loves it. And we totally like owe the man because he's just run with it. He always says that he's painted it with Master Series and whatever else he's using at the time. So the best way you can get people to try Reaper paint is to paint something awesome with it. So a little bit of a shadow there too at the back of the head, because this surface is up and down, right? So if the light is falling on her from above, as the surface falls away in this curve here, the light's going to hit strongly up here on top of the head, but as it falls away, it's not going to hit strongly here. So that means you can put more shading on this vertically inclined surface. Nice shadow back there, see? That's too bad, Bilbo. Do what you can. I mean, I always recommend people get like just 1 or 2 bottles of Reaper paint. Can make a big difference. The biggest difference you're going to get is if you get pure white. If you can afford only 1 bottle of Reaper paint. And remember, we do have a European distribution center, so, if you're in Europe, you can get it. But if you get only 1 Master Series paint because your budget is just bad, get pure white. And just use that, mix that into other paints for highlights. You will instantly get a lot of advantage from it. Yeah, the other thing Tashi does that I really love is that I think it's a she, I'm not sure, but Tashi is doing paint by numbers, adult paint by numbers for her dad, and she or he is absolutely right in that it will build brush control, like, because you're doing those little details and you're painting it, right? And you're trying to stay in the lines, you're doing all that. So if you are inclined, and I'm totally tempted to pick one of these suckers up, because I didn't even know adult paint by numbers were a thing, but I used to do paint by numbers when I was a kid. Now I really, really want to pick one up, because it looks so fun, and it's good practice for brush control. Like, it's really good practice. So that's another thing I really think. I thank Tashi for exposing me to. But now I might have to buy myself an adult paint by number for Christmas and paint it. I'll try to grab something like they just did, where there's like a transparent object, like a wine glass or a decanter or something, to do those, so I can get a closer look at all those highlights and shadows and the transparent or reflective object. Maybe I'll find one with like a shiny silver teapot. Work on my hardcore NMM. Yeah, I often use it to shade red hair if I'm going this dark. If my red hair is more of a medium or you know, like a carrot top Polaris heart, then I wouldn't use purple. But when I'm going this dark red with it, and because my red is kind of artificial looking, I can get away with the purple. You could get away with purple even on a more natural auburn, though. I mean, it's a way to sneak that color into shadows, because you can always shade red with purple, right? So since you can shade red with purple, you can shade red hair with purple. You just, usually I'll recommend that you do it when you have a nice dark red as your base. It'll work a little better that way. Nice cereals. Like, I need to look for some adult paint by numbers. I need to just hit the switch and just order one. Just to have some fun. It just sounds like it would be such a break, right? Yeah, well, right now the hair is kind of red. I mean, it is going to go orange, though. And it may even go up toward kind of a coppery, like a lighter yellowy orange. We'll see how far I take it. Usually for red hair, you want a bright white orange. You don't actually introduce like a yellowy orange so much. So, all right, let's take our highlight here. Let's see what we can do. So remember the bell curve, right? So we're going to paint it, and we're not even going to paint the strands at this point, guys. We're just going to paint a layer of our orange right down the middle between these two shadows. You can leave a little bit of your base coat sticking out. You really should leave a little bit of your base coat sticking out. And right away I can see I'm going to have to build this color up because it is a bit transparent, and over the dark it's hard to see. But I am wanting a dark red hair, so that's not entirely bad. It just means I'm going to come up really gradually. Now keep your purple around, because as you go in here, once you get to the point where you want to bring out strands, you'll be using your base coat and that purple to kind of suggest locks of hair. So right now, just paint it like it's cloth. Paint it, just ignore the strands. Just paint it straight across. All you're concentrating on at this point is the highlight and shadow. And the midtone. Nightshade purple, the only thing with nightshade is, remember, it's got a lot of black in it. If you want a purple without that much black in it, that's really dark, go Kraken. Once it releases. I understand that Kraken is not currently available. Now, one thing I think I'm going to do, I think that I see a little texture here, so I think this is supposed to be a braid, but it's going to be so hard when my orange isn't popping here to make that come out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my white and underpaint that braid. And if it works out really well, I may end up doing that for some of the hair. So underpainting is a technique where you can put a much darker or much lighter color underneath a layer of paint to try to get more contrast. Hey Rax, how's it going? So here, because I want the details to come out on this tiny braid, I can see them on the one side but not on the other. Pardon me while I stop breathing while I hit these little tiny braid details. These are really fine. Bobby went tiny with these. The trick here is that the white paint has to be thin enough to come off your brush, but thick enough to create a solid dot so that you have it for the underpainting. Yeah, there you go, Twistoma. Perfect. Yeah, I have to go over to... I think I'll go order one. Why not? It could be something fun to do on New Year's Day. I can take a break from mini painting and just do a regular painting. I bet I'll be super fast at it. And it's also kind of a puzzle, right? Because you got to find all the... like, I'm working with the blue. Where is the blue? Oh my god, the blue is all over the place in tiny little bits. Well, that's where the big brush... That's where the big brush jelly comes in. Because the way I squeeze my brush out with my fingertips or my hand instead of with a dry paper towel means that there's always water in the brush. See it? See how it glistens? So then I just load it, and that moisture in the brush keeps my paint more fluid. It doesn't dry out nearly as fast. So I can work with thicker paint and get away with it. Now I've gotten such in the habit of just using my hand to wring out my brush that I don't know that I could go back to a different habit. All right, so this is, I'm not seeing the details as clearly on this side, so we just can make a succession of dots and dashes to bring out that tiny little braid. The bigger the dot, the more it's going to show up. And then back here, we probably have kind of a ball of hair twisted around itself. So we'll do that as well to kind of bring out some details there. Under 20 bucks, yeah, nice. Yeah, the Kraken ink is good for this, for sure. I'm glad I had it still sitting around. It didn't get put away the other day, so I could actually find it, unlike my bleached linen. Just trying to make these strands pop a little bit more so I can make them come around. There we go. All right, so that's a little better. And I've got to take the braid right up to that. There. And I got to take this up around to the front, and then we'll see what we can do. Hopefully these are pulled out enough. So I'm going to take my mid-tone orange here, and I'm going to put a glaze of this over the top. Or a heavy, I could say a heavy wash, not really a glaze. I'm going to thin it down. I want the white to show through, and it should show through as long as my paint is moderately thin. Yeah, Coobs, I had to just figure out which ones I use the most often and kind of put aside the ones that I liked but could easily mix. And then we're just going to paint a stripe of this orange over that. Over that braid. And we're going to let it kind of dry. Probably need a bit more. I just need it to show up a bit. All right, that's actually not bad. We'll see how it goes. It'll be more interesting if I do kind of a mix. I probably should have done a mix of white and my orange. Let me try that actually as a mid-tone here. Sometimes you just go back and forth. A lot of the times when you're doing hair, you're going to futz back and forth to try to get the effect you want. Especially when you're trying to like do an interesting color, like a realistic blonde or redhead. Auburn, I would say, is one of the hardest hair colors. Because it is so dark, but it gets so coppery in the highlights. So this time I went with a bit of white mixed in with my orange. I can still take my base orange over it. Yeah, just a way to keep the long hair out of your face to do the temple braid. Now I'm going to put kind of a glaze of that orange over the top of this. Don't want to get washed out with your highlights. This is a challenge here, is to bring up the color realistically, but not to wash out the color. Because you do need that bright orange feel. That's starting to look pretty good. I'm going to get the top of the head. All right, so let's do what I just did, which is to take this orange mid-tone and mix some white with it. You can see that color here. And that's pretty pale and washy and horrible, but then you can glaze with this more intense color over the top of it. And it's not quite as strong as the white underpainting, but it's still considered underpainting. Because I'm still using the opacity of the white and the lightness of it to bring up the hair highlights faster than I would be able to if I was just trying to layer that kind of transparent orange over things. So here we're going to get the top of the head, because the light would definitely fall all around here. And even though I'm not really picking out strands, I'm going to use a brush stroke that's in the direction the hair is growing, just like I would with an animal. So although I am painting it kind of like cloth still, I'm still like making sure my brush strokes suggest, so any artifact brush strokes that I leave at the edges will work with the direction of the hair. And let's put then our thinned orange over the top of that. See how that makes it brighter? But we don't lose that highlight, because where the orange goes over the auburn color, notice it's still dark. See? So that's a quick step, a quick way to get that orangey highlight in on the hair. And I kind of skipped over here, so I'm going to have to grab some color and put it in there. And then probably the highlight after this is where I would start suggesting strands. It's got a little bit of it now. So now we're bringing up that hair. Oh, and we forgot this braid. We need to totally deal with that braid, don't we? Figures. My hair never would grow any farther than the middle of my back. My terminal length was pretty short, so I didn't really get into braiding it. I would tie it back a lot, though. I'm going to take my brown liner and line around the outside of this braid. To just kind of bring it out. You can see how that makes it stand out a little bit, even though it's really dark. And we already shaded kind of on the inside here, but we'll put a little bit more. So now that braid actually stands out, and I can highlight it. I'm going to use my trick again with mixing white into my orange. And actually I need to remember this braid as well, so let's do braids. These braids are kind of linear. This one is a more of a, I can see the different strands in this braid. I can't really see, this one's turned, so I can't really see it as well. Nice cubes. All right, so let's get some white, mix some orange into it. If I was doing a very large bust, I probably would make my own separate puddle of this white mixed with orange. But since this is a small model and I only need small amounts of it at a time, I'm not really... Yeah, I can't, mine was like between my shoulder blades. I cut my own hair. I just taught myself to do it. My mom always cut her own hair. She started going to a hairdresser when she was older, but when she was younger, she would cut us kids' hair, and she would cut her own. So little dashes of lighter color where I can see details. Actually, that's... Looks like she almost has like a cap on her hair. Like she doesn't look necessarily like she's ending with strands. But I'll try to see what I can do. Yeah, Thursdays at 3 p.m. She's usually going, she goes right before my D&D stream on Thursday. And then we glaze with the orange, and we get our definition on the braid. Alrighty. Now I've got a couple of different like strands here, alternating strands, like traditional braids. So I'm going to just try to hit them where I can see them. So kind of back and forth. And if you mess up, you still have your base coat out. Yeah, thanks, Holtor. It's still coming up. Yeah, maybe. I mean, she may have messed it up somehow. I mean, usually we don't just get a straight up white, because it's hard to mess up pure white. You'd have to mess up the amount of additives that you put in it or something. It's possible, Valen. It's possible. I mean, if so, good for you. Pure white is the most awesome white. Hands down. No question. And I just oranged myself. Because it's going to be that... It's been that kind of week. Where you just dip yourself in everything. Yeah, pure white is magic. Magic, magic, pure white. I'm just going to break this up. I actually got a mistake on there. There we go. Now we're a little bit more Brady. But yeah, if I had to switch, if I could only keep one bottle of Reaper paint and I had to switch to an entirely different paint line, I would take pure white. It fixes everything. I use it when I use my Vallejo or my sorry, I like the Scale 75 tube paint, the Artist Series paint. When I use that, I highlight it with pure white. So I use a mix. I'm running out of orange. Oh no. There, that'll have to do. Thanks, Jelly. Well, good. And not just this one, but any, you know, you could do this hair color on almost anybody. It just made sense to use it on Highlander. And I hadn't done auburn hair on stream. And I wanted to kind of try some mixes. So this has been fun for me because I get to try out mixes that I've been wanting to try. Which is always fun and experimental. It's cool when I can do a color mix on stream and then go, ooh, I like that. I'm going to totally do that on a bust next. That kind of thing. So she's coming along. She's getting there. You can see the hair starting to come up, and you see it's coming up in masses. It's really not coming up in strands yet, right? I really saved the strands for like the second to final and final highlights. Up to that point, I really want to get the color nailed, and I want to get the highlight, like just the color, the area the highlight is taking up. I just want to get that nailed. So at this point, though, I think I can actually go up to that orange-white mix. So let's actually put it in its own little happy area on the palette. Now this is a color where you could just go with this. It's kind of a German orange. That's what a lot of people used to highlight red hair, is German orange. But I'm going to go up brighter. I want it more coppery. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to add a drop of my sunrise orange. I want it more saturated. I don't want it quite so washed out. You don't want to go too much, but that's actually pretty good. Because if you look at auburn hair in the sun, it gets those bright strands of orange copper going through it. Yeah, the sword, I mean, and the sword has some shift issues in metal, but it is a lot easier to get it to, I mean, it's not gonna, the sword itself isn't gonna bend, at least in metal. I found the hilt was took a lot of filing, but other than that, it's a good piece. So you can see kind of the difference here. There's that pinkish, it's almost copper highlight, actually, from our copper NMM, and you can use that triad to paint red hair, by the way. Or at least use the two oranges in it. But I wanted to go more coppery, more red hair in the sun, more orange. So I went there instead of with this pinkish color. Hey, thanks for the sub, JT. 15 months in a row. That's a man who puts a reminder to resub his Prime. So we're going to go with this warmer orange, and we're going to see how it works. Now, we still have our base coat orange, and the nice thing about, actually, this is funny, so I should bring this up. So this color that I mixed by hand is actually really close to tarnished copper, 9305, I think, is it? Yeah, 9305. And then this is really close to copper highlight, 93... Oh, this is 9304, that's 9305. So this actually is a lot like the copper NMM colors. You can use tarnished copper and copper highlight absolutely to do red hair. You probably want to go with a darker, like an auburn, one of the colors that I mixed instead. But it totally works. Totally works. Yeah, when you've got a really thin sword and bones, it can be just really difficult. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I just have a liking for metal, so I got this one in metal. All right, so if I'm going to go through here now, I want a bit more highlight, and I want to actually put little strands in here. And I'm probably going to add more strands than there actually are, so I'm not only going to paint the top of the strands that are sculpted, but I'm also going to paint like kind of between the strands. I really want this to look more natural. The problem with 3D sculpted hair is that it tends to be a little chunky. And so sometimes you want to put strands in the middle of the strands, if you know what I mean. And if you think too heavy-handed with your highlight, remember you have this nice orange copper. You can just come back and kind of glaze over the top of it to bring it back up. Also, if you ever got too dark in any of your hair areas, you've still got your colors open. You can come back and extend them. See how nice that makes it look now? Look at how now you can see the highlights in the hair, right? Now you can almost see the light. Yeah, I think she's one that really turns out well in metal also, obviously why I ordered her that way. I agree with you. So it's when you start getting close to white, when you start bringing hair up higher and doing the strands, that's when you really start, you really can start bringing out that hair look. But I don't start doing this until I've got a solid, highlight mid-tone shadow on my hair. Then for the final two highlights, that's where you bring up this little detail work. You don't have to worry about it prior to that. Just make sure you've got your shadows and your highlights in the right place. Then you have kind of a map as to where you should put these strand highlights. They should always be in the middle of your previous highlight. And just get your thin brush with a thin tip, and do little strands. And more or less make them go, like I said, in the same direction as the hair. But you don't need to, if you put some that in between the sculpted strands, it's not a problem. In fact, you should. There we go. Now we need the top of the head, which is really, when she's got her hair scraped back like this, it's really going to just be the top of the head. And it's almost going to be kind of a rounded area. I love this rich orange that we're getting, just FYI. And again, I'll mostly follow the strands, but then if there's blank space between them, I will put a strand in there. And you want it to be a rounded highlight. So taper it off toward the edges and toward the front. Like the shape of the highlight, if you just look at the strands, the area that you're covering, the shape of your highlight should be round, see? Then you can ask yourself if you need a little more. Yeah, and here we need a little more in the back, you can tell, right? We've got a nice highlight there. Yeah, I mean, the best thing is to find a picture and try to see what colors might be close. But making your own color for red hair, or for anything really, doing your own mix for leather or for anything, it helps give your piece more individuality. I mean, it'll essentially be the thing where people come up to you at the convention going, "What did you use for the red hair?" And you can proudly say, "I mixed these colors and it's awesome." So there we are. So then I think that's looking okay. Some of these strands, you know, are going to catch the light down here. And because I'm not doing the highest highlight yet, I can hit them a little bit. I may want to hit them with this orange and then glaze again, because the hair that's, you know, here isn't necessarily going to be getting as much of a highlight as the hair higher up. So I probably want to grab some of my orange, do a bit of a glaze. So I have some highlight there, but it's not as bright as the top of the head. So that's glazes can be really good for this on hair. Like Sue Wachowski, who used to teach at ReaperCon. Sue was a Golden Demon winner. And Sue, she was the one who taught me this hair technique, or taught me the whole paint it like cloth first, then worry about it. She did a lot more glazing than I did. Her hair just looked sleek, the hair that she would paint. It's very much her style. But yeah, glazing on top of to make all your colors blend in and get everything to work. I mean, that's really a rich, that's coming out like a really rich auburn. I'm liking this. 600 Reaper pants. You have everything then. Yes, thanks for that sub. All right, so we've got kind of a blank. You kind of have to look. We've got kind of a blank area in here. So I want to bring this up a little bit. I want to put a strand in. And then I'm going to glaze it, because I don't want that pale of a color there. But I do want some detail there. So again, using underpainting to add a little bit of detail. So that's good. Now I need this pale color to come and highlight some of the braids. Yeah, the holiday schedule.
Yeah, the rough estimation right now, Anne, would be obviously this Thursday and Friday.
Yeah.
This next Thursday and Friday, we won't do anything.
Christmas Eve and Christmas.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
The following Thursday and Friday, we know we won't do anything Friday. There's still some we can't make up our mind on whether or not we're going to do a Reaper Live that Thursday, though.
Ah, gotcha.
So
New Year's Eve Reaper Live could be cool.
Right. And I think that if we do something that Thursday, it would likely end up being all virtual instead of like coming into the studio. So I would say that for your show that Thursday morning, we could probably still do a show. Because I don't think anyone's doing New Year's Eve technically. I think that's even a day that everyone at the factory has off. I think. I'm not really sure.
New Year's Day we always got off, and New Year's Eve was often an optional. But since most of the stuff goes down in the evening on New Year's Eve, obviously, I don't think we ever got it as an official day off. At least not while I was there. Little highlights to bring those braids out, guys. But yeah, just keep me posted, Justin. I'll just assume that Christmas Eve and Christmas I'm off, and then
and New Year's Day for sure.
Yeah, New Year's
Day. So it's
Day.
really only New Year's Eve, yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll know more when we get closer to that. Somebody will make a decision about whether the shows are going on New Year's Eve or not.
Absolutely.
Since Thursday is one of our bigger days as far as content. So, all right. So now I'm just, again, continuing. If I see a spot that's kind of blank or that needs more detail, I'll use that highlight color on it. But if it's a spot that also wouldn't be getting as much light, then I'm going to get my base orangey color and glaze over it to take it down just a notch so that we still have something there, but it's not as bright. So you can see how that works. Lucas streaming on Christmas. I don't know, maybe I'll do something. Christmas is Friday. Yeah, I was gonna say, if it was Thursday, I'd maybe do my D&D. But it's Christmas Eve this Thursday, so I'll have to decide if I'm doing... I did want to take some time off over the holidays, to be honest, so I am kind of glad. All right, so we've got really kind of pretty hair coming in here, guys. I think I need... This is still a little bit blank back here. Like, I've got a shadow, but I feel I need, like, a little more strands going on here. So I'm going to do that trick again, where I use this highlight color to bring some detail in, but then we're going to glaze it with the orange, because this has still got that crack in purple. We still don't want to lose the shadow there. We just want to add a little bit of detail leading into that shadow. Ah, oh no, dropping my brush, not good. And you know what, I think I want one more line of detail coming down there. I don't like anything to be without detail. I don't like a black hole, a visual black hole on the model ever, so Grab our glaze. Glaze, 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 glaze. Sound effects optional. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Macy's did its Christmas or its Thanksgiving Day parade, but it took some finagling, and a lot of people just piped in numbers from remotely. So now I'm going to go and correct a couple things. Like, I feel like I do need a couple of these strands to come out, but just less. So again, I'm going to go in, extend these strands a little bit, but then I'll bring that glaze in to bring them down. So I don't want this edge to be just a mass of no detail. So I will bring in a little bit of light here and there. And then we'll do our glaze. Yeah, we'll see. I just want some time off to just veg. Like, I'm still catching up. I'm trying to get ahead a little bit on the Patreon stuff by Christmas Eve so that I can really take the weekend to completely rejuvenate, because I definitely get kind of exhausted. But if I take like even 1 or 2 days to just veg and not do anything painting related, unless it's like fun painting, then I really, really come out of that with a lot of energy. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking I'm going to do. All right, so let's see here. I think I still want a little bit more here. So now I'm just fine tuning. I'm just like kind of looking at the hair critically and going, well, is there anywhere that doesn't read like I want it to? And can I go in and correct it a little bit there? This is also a time where you could take your base auburn color, that cherry color that we started with. You guys remember that color. It is this one. This is a time where we could take this color back in if we want to accentuate some of these streaks that are deeper, right? Like that one on the side of the head. If we don't want it to be a shadow. John David, I usually work on Patreon stuff or commissions. So yeah, I paint pretty solidly, like up to 4 when I take Kiri out, or I'm streaming D&D. So half the week I stream D&D and I work on my D&D game or Patreon stuff in between my morning stream and the D&D. And then, yeah, in the evening, lately David and I usually play computer games a bit, but we also do some hobbying. So I paint a lot during the day, and sometimes it's, if I'm doing a PDF, I still have to paint like swatches or examples. So there are some days where I don't do much painting other than the streams, and there are some days where I do a lot more. So it depends on the day. And then on the weekend, I'm often working on commissions or my own projects. Lately, I haven't had a lot of time for my own projects, but I'm trying to change that by kind of catching up, getting ahead with some things. There are some projects I'd really like to work on, so. So I want a little bit more of a highlight there. I maybe want a tiny bit more of a highlight there. If I want a little bit more of a shadow, I can paint that in. Because if I feel like I lost a lot of the cherry color that we started with, which inevitably you will, you'll bury a lot of it under shadows and highlights. Now is a good time to come back in with that color. And if you've got some you know, like kind of crevices between strands that seem like they might be a little darker, you can do that to break up this mass of hair back here so that it's not all quite so. See how I did there? It brought out a couple of different strands. It helps to do that sometimes to break up your surface. So it's not all perfectly symmetrical, because of course on your head it wouldn't be. All in all, though, that's coming along very well. Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, I try very hard. This is my second go at freelancing, so, and I'm definitely not making a lot of the mistakes that I made the first time around. So I feel like I've progressed. But it's still hard and stressful sometimes. It gets on top of you. Like, you got to keep up with it. It's easy to feel overwhelmed. So I definitely, I make it a point not to have every vacation day be a working vacation day. Some days I just have to totally slack, or I'll get burned out. So I'm a lot better about that now than I used to be. Because I've come to understand that, like, taking a day truly off really does rejuvenate me, and I come out of it with, like, triple the energy so I can get so much else done. Whereas if I would have not taken that day, I would have maybe gotten a couple things done, but I would have still been tired. Generally, I've done those a little bit differently, Grey Wolf. Depends really on the sculpt. This is specifically for human hair. I've done wolves. I don't think I've done anything recently. We're painting a Sphinx and she has some fur. I tend to wet blend, honestly, if I'm doing animals, instead of doing this layering. Because I think that it lays out the highlight, midtone, shadow a lot faster and more organically. And for animals, I want that effect. So yes, you can do it this way on animals, probably, depending on the sculpt, depending on how the hair is sculpted. But it may not work quite well on as well on animals, or it may take you a longer time on animals. So many animal sculpts are so different, it's really hard to say. Yeah, like with wolves, I always wet blend them because you want that transition from the darker gray to the cream. And I find that wet blending is far more efficient than trying to do that this way. But with her hair, it's all one color. So you could do this kind of thing on, say, a lion, assuming that the fur on the lion is sculpted, which it's not always, right? See, that's the problem, is animals are sculpted so differently. Like you've got... Here, Grey Wolf, 1 second. Let me grab these. These are great. Actually, I have 2 great examples of how animals are different. So, like, you've got everything from Kitty. Kitty has every bit of fur sculpted, right? When you look at her tail and her head, she's got a fur texture over the whole thing. But then you look at Sphinx, who's more like lions are sculpted. She has nothing sculpted for fur texture here on her haunch until you get down to the really long fur here. So and then you've got longer fur on the belly, you know. So the fur on the belly here, I did do similar to the way I did this. So I did actually layer up those colors. I started with a wet blend, though. I started wet blending because I wanted a more organic blend for the underlying golden colors. So that's what I mean, like, it depends. It depends on how the fur is sculpted. And, you know, I'll probably be doing something similar to this, maybe on her tail. But this starting was like wet blending or glazing. Like, I did a lot of wet blending to get the transitions from the kind of beige color down to her darker fur. There's a lot of that. So I really change up how I paint fur on animals depending on how they're sculpted. There we go. Luckily, I had animals close at hand, so I could talk about it. Yeah, no problem. It's always better to have a visual. Because, well, you know how different they are. And then the Games Workshop wolves are completely different, right? Because their fur is very angular. So I probably would wet blend them and then do something like this for the individual tufts of fur, like the Space Wolves wolves. Okay, so I'm good, but I'm not up to my final highlight yet. And I feel like I could use a little bit more highlight up here. But maybe I'll just bring that in with my next highlight. Because that's pretty okay. That seems pretty good across the board, although I still feel like I need a little more on the side of the head. You can't just drop the side of the head into shadow. You just have to be really cautious about how you highlight. Because you just wouldn't get as much. Thank you, Grey Wolf. Yeah, when I started it, I was like, is this gonna work? But it's turning out okay. Alright. And on this side, I feel like I need a little bit more too, because I got kind of streaky. You see, we just have a couple of streaks there. So we want to bring it in. We still have our last highlight to do, but we are at 6 after 11. So let me do a quick final highlight, because it's important to talk about final highlights on hair. So for hair to really look like hair, you must take it up to white or near white. because it is shiny. A shiny object will always go to white or near white. It is why you must take all of your non-metallic metal up to white. Hair is a little bit more, like I said, translucent, and it's also extremely fine, so you usually don't get the pop highlights that you get on other things on hair. There we go. That's a little better. But I'll still go close to white. And I'm going to go really copper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of this color. I'm going to put even more orange in, and I'm going to put pure white in to really bring it up. So 1 brushful of this in a new well. Big fat brushful. 1 drop of orange to really, really get some saturation into it. And 1 drop of white. Yeah, the fur is really spiky on the Space Wolves, Coos. I really feel like wet blend and then some targeted highlight strands are the way to go. Although, to really do a good job on them, I think you'd have to glaze a bit afterwards, too. So, I like the models, and the fur is interesting. It's a very different texture, but yeah. So now you can see how much brighter and oranger we went here, right? And this may not be light enough. I'm going to actually... I'll stick with it for now, but I may think it's not light enough, so... yeah, they sculpted the fur in 3D, and fur is very hard. Ask any of our sculptors. Fur is really difficult to sculpt in ZBrush. Fur and hair are probably the hardest things to get natural effects with, I think. Alright, so we're going to use this color. Let's see how light it looks. And then we will... call it for the day, and the guys can look for a raid. So that is noticeably lighter because we're dealing with very dark hair. I'm going to keep this highlight to the center of where my previous highlight went. So bringing it up another level. And a little bit more here. All right, I'm going to grab a little bit of this and hit some of these tiny braids one more time. I'm going to hit this hair here. So you see with every highlight, and I'm going to be hitting the center of the previous strands. Because now I'm really trying to suggest light. This may be my final highlight. It may be, I may do one more depending on, how hardcore I'm going. So every additional highlight brings out the light of the hair a bit more. Which is why we always used to say the going gag phrase was, highlight it till you think it looks good and then do 2 more highlights. And if we feel like we lost some of our depth, we can always go back and glaze with our coppery orange color. Although at this point, in order to keep my highlights, I would probably thin that glaze down a lot more. So more light. More light. More light. More light. Let's see. I feel like I need to bring it. Her forehead's really failing, so we gotta bring that down. So I'm going actually back to a couple highlights ago to bring that down. I haven't been paying attention to it And this is my folly. That I have not been paying too much attention to it. And we definitely need to pay more attention to it. That's a bit better. Yeah, later, Scrying Eye. Has a great weekend. Yeah, I have a 40k army sitting around that every once in a while I think about working on, but there are other projects I'd want to work on more. If I ever get a gaming group again, then I'll be motivated to work on it. Usually that's it. If I play a game, then I get super motivated to paint the models after. Alright, that's better. I still feel like I've gotten a little bit too washed out here. And this is where I just go back and kind of touch it up here and there. Like a little bit of this orangey glaze here and there to bring my color back. We're getting there. We're getting there. There we go. It's a little bit better. Kind of, and then it's just like fine tuning. It's going back and forth, adding in strands. I have Eldar. I used to have Space Orcs. I started with Tyranids. But I gave up on Horde armies, much as I tend to like the personalities of the Horde armies just because it's impossible to paint. So I have Craft World Eldar. I made up my own color scheme. It's kind of faux iridescent. But I figured if I was going to paint Eldar, I may as well just go all in. Because on a real like crazy paint scheme, because I've always said they were a painter's army, and that's why I ignored them, because I knew that it would take me too long to paint them. But if I was just going to give up and go Eldar, I may as well just go whole hog. So my paint scheme is not easy. So that's coming up very well. No, I have no urge. I did a set of Harlequins for somebody as a commission once, and it proved to me that I just don't like the paint scheme. It's just not fun to me, HM. They're just too over the top. And I tend not to like the models. Like, they're the fancy-prancy Eldar that I'm not a fan of. I like the Eldar that look like they really could kick your butt. I like the Aspect Warriors. Like, that's always been my thing with the Eldar, is I've wanted to have a Craft World army because I wanted a lot of Aspect Warriors because I really liked them. Too small, Pendrig. It is my much considered opinion that color shift does not work very well at all on very small models. And Eldar are quite spindly. I'm having more fun doing my faux iridescence. I start with Void Blue, and then I go up to like yellow-green through all the intermediate shades, and then I underlight them with purple. They're pretty awesome, actually. They just take a while to paint. But I love my color scheme. I would never just do iridescent paint. It would be so cheap. Yeah. Yeah, with the Turbo Dork. I have the Turbo Dork color shift, actually. I'm going to do a thing on them. Who is just talking? Things, stuff. I'm losing track of chat here. One second. Oh, yeah, Chef of Love. Yeah. Yeah, my next Patreon thing, I'm going to try some Turbo Dork color shift and see how they work. But I'm going to try it on a bust because I think it's got a much better chance to look good on that. But yeah, so 5 different armies. Yeah, that's my ex had that kind of. He was always starting a new thing, but he would just do an airbrush and do a pretty good, simple job on them. He was the smart army painter. If you're gonna have 5 armies, learning to airbrush is really a smart move. All right, do a little highlight here on the little bun. I think that's looking pretty good. Like, I would probably put one more highlight on her hair, but I think what I tend to do, guys, if you're new or if you've forgotten, is I tend to do what's called a soft finish. So here I've got it looking pretty good, but I'm not sure about the relative lightness or darkness of it, right? Because I haven't done any of the rest of this. I don't know what color I'm going to do this fur yet or how it's going to affect how the hair looks. If I went really dark with the fur here, then it might make the hair look a lot lighter, and I wouldn't want to necessarily go up with another highlight, or maybe I would want to shift the color. So what I'm going to do is call this a soft finish. I'm going to go on with other parts of the model and see, and then at the end, you can go back in and adjust everything if you need to, right? But like right now, I've got so much light color on this model, and it's really making the hair look dark no matter how much I highlight it. So I've got to keep in mind that that's still happening. That the other colors on the model are still affecting each other, even though I've highlighted this hair. It still is going to look different after the rest of the model is painted. So I'm going to halt there and not put on one more highlight because I can just remember what I did. And then at the end, if I have to, I can come back in and do it again. Although I do think I need to re-highlight the back of this braid because I lost my little tiny braidlets. So, all right, who do we have out there to raid?
Miniatures Den, actually.
Luca, that guy we've been talking about all stream. All right, well then llamas it is. And I hope all of you, there we go, got our braidlet back in. I hope all of you have a lovely, lovely weekend. It will be a holiday week next week, and we'll look forward to it. I don't have any Christmas miniatures. Maybe I should sculpt a Santa hat on something.
I like that idea. You should do that.
All right, guys. Have a fun weekend, and I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.
Thank you guys very much. Don't forget, we have Reaperland today. Then after that, we have Bones 5 Live. And then to end the night, we are premiering our show, The House of Vex, with Aaron Lovejoy. So we have a whole day full of programming. Come check us out if you didn't plan on it. It's a great way to spend your Friday night, and we look forward to seeing you guys.